Awesome. Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you very much for joining me on the Agile Chef podcast blog. And today I've got a very special guest, my very first guest on this channel, Lucy Stafford-Hughes. Lucy is a colleague of mine. We work together in a organization where we were working on a big transformation, and so I've asked her to join us today to talk about some of the pain points, some of the positives, and possibly some trends when in relation to agile transformation and culture. Welcome to the show, Lucy.
Thank you very much, Omar. Thank you very much for having me.
So just a brief introduction. Lucy, well, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Lucy. I am really passionate about Agile, and I've worked in business change for maybe over 10 years, and I've worked with Agile for probably most of that, definitely about 7 or 8 years of that. I've been involved in Agile transformations for a large portion, and I've been involved in some degree in transformations in policing, higher education, in automotive, and now in retail. So a number of different sectors.
That's interesting because you started at the was it the Merseyside Police?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a very, very quick dip into Agile on a big program where we had a consultancy come in, and they were saying we're going to run this whole program, which involved amalgamating or considering amalgamating the 3 IT departments eventually, and we're going to run this in an Agile way. So that was sort of the first introduction in a workplace of people coming in and delivering Agile methods.
And I believe you were an analyst at that time?
Yes, I was a business analyst.
A business analyst, that's right. Yeah, fantastic. I've worked with a lot of business analysts who at Cancer Research UK, for example, who were very keen on learning about user stories and sort of rather than requirements gathering, they would sort of generate those from a user's perspective, which was quite refreshing. Awesome. And you've also got a DevOps from the DevOps Institute certification.
I have, yes. That was when I was doing the transformation in Riverside Housing. We were looking at how we did Agile transformation in line with the DevOps transformation. And as part of that, got to go and do a DevOps certification, which was incredibly interesting.
I bet. And you're also a certified Agile team facilitator and Agile coaching. You've got your Agile coaching qualification. You're a Scrum Master and a IBM Enterprise design thinker.
Yes, that was a course IBM running. It was in lockdown, and a member of my team found it. And that again was really interesting. I don't know if it's still running, but if you go on to IBM and have a look, it might be. And that was really interesting because it's sort of, there's lots of concepts within Agile transformations that aren't just Agile. There's loads of HR concepts that come in, people style concepts, and some of that design thinking, some of it's very much related to Agile, and some of it is almost a different topic, but so interwoven that I found it fascinating how all those concepts come together.
100% agree. I love design thinking, and I've done quite a lot of workshops around that. So around sort of visualizing your user and their needs, and then digging deep into their pain points, because that sort of forms your vision for your product, and then you're from that vision you can do all sorts of wonderful things to look at what your MVPs are, how you get a roadmap of value to your for your product to your customers.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think we can probably dive into our first question. So today, for our viewers today, we've got 4 really important questions that we're going to be asking our expert. The first is, what are the biggest challenges? And then the second is, what are the key elements of success in Agile transformation? The third one is, how can we organize a culture of continuous learning and improvement? And then we'll finish it off with what are the latest and most exciting trends in agile transformation. So do stay tuned, please, with us. I promise you, it's going to be really fruitful and exciting. Right. So, Lucy, what is the biggest challenge or the biggest collection of challenges that organizations face when transforming to agile ways of working?
There are so many. I think one of the biggest challenges is that it's not just changing process, it is people and culture. So you're changing often the way people are used to doing things, and changing people is incredibly difficult, and changing their mindset is incredibly difficult. So it's never a linear journey. So you can get quite an initial rosy stage where everyone's sort of engaged. It tends to be quite limited, small team, people who are quite engaged. Maybe it's a bit of a trial team. And that tends to be quite positive, and you start feeling quite good about it. And then as you start rolling it out to the wider business, that's when you'll hit the bigger load of resistance. And that's where you can feel like it's 10 steps forward, 20 steps back. And that can be really challenging. Holding the nerve for leaders can be really challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, when you were saying that, I imagined the bell curve for change. I forgot the lady's name, but her surname was Bell. So basically, it's all about the sort of, yay, we're all very excited at the start. We get going and, oh, this is so interesting. And then you hit a bit of a flat at the top, and then you start getting disenchanted because, you know, you face so many problems. You know, I think it's you know, the leadership that sort of buy into things, and then they expect everybody in the company to do agile, but then they don't necessarily get involved in it, and it becomes about tools and processes rather than the mindset.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you hit a snag and you start that bell curve starts going down, because people face a lot of problems, but then, you know, at some point it goes back up again, because hopefully they stick to it and they realize actually the benefits are not what we thought it was. It's not about using a new tool that's going to magically make everything better, but actually it's just the way that we're working, the way that we're, you know, going through things. Like, for example, you know, we might do things in iterations, and we can see the sort of the results a bit quicker. We can get things to the client a bit better, and hopefully that means we've got a feedback loop that we can really get focused on and sort of deliver what the customer needs rather than what we think they need. Fantastic. Any other thoughts on that?
I agree with everything that you've said. I think it's really easy for senior leaders to see agile transformations as something that happens to their teams that they get benefit from. And they're not always as open to the fact this is a journey for them as well. And they have to transform the way they lead. And they can be really on board with the mindset and the culture and trying to get all those good things and listings about the customer and collaboration and reducing blame culture. And that's really easy when things are going well. Yeah. And as soon as things aren't going so well, you'll have a group of senior people who were promoted with a different mindset, with a different culture, and it's their comfort zone, and they'll very easily fall into that. So it's, how do you, as agile professionals on the transformation, how do you keep understanding that will happen, and how do you keep bringing them back to all the things that you're trying to achieve and bring them back to the end state that they want to get to?
Absolutely. And I think another thing worth adding to that is, cognitively speaking, people are being asked to forget everything that they've been doing for their career, for the length of their career, and start learning about this new thing called Agile. Most of the time it's specifically Scrum. In big organizations, it's how do you scale that? So you've not only got to learn Scrum, but you've got to learn how to scale it. And it's just massive cognitive overload. So people, you know, they struggle. They struggle with that.
Absolutely. And also, they might be very comfortable with the work that they're doing. Agile might throw up that maybe while their work could be valuable, there are other things that are more valuable. and accepting that the work they were doing might not continue can be really, really challenging for people. Seeing things and seeing their value in a different way. How do I take my skills and abilities but do it in a different way with different people? And that can be a difficult journey.
Excellent. Okay, so we've covered some of the challenges. Let's look at some, in your expertise, what are some of the key elements of a successful transformation?
Lots of resilience. All the things that I've just mentioned. I think one of the things that I've seen done, maybe where there's learnings to come from in the agile transformation I've been involved in, is that organizations not necessarily always being really clear on the vision for success.
Right.
And that can mean that along the journey, when things start to get difficult, they don't have a North Star vision that's easy to point to say, are we achieving the vision? How long to achieve the vision? And they then can get sidetracked with other measures rather than what's the overall thing we're trying to achieve. So they'll try and measure how many people are mobilized, how many people are having ceremonies. And some of those can be really good ideas of how the transformation is going. What they're not measuring is what are the outcomes that we wanted to achieve. So for successful transformation, I think it's to be really clear on this is the outcome that we want to achieve from an agile transformation, such as we want people to be working together more collaboratively. We want to reduce silos. We want to be able to pivot quickly towards customer needs. So all of those things that we should get, but being clear about how we measure that. How do we understand what that journey looks like? I think agile transformations, I've said this a few times, are incredibly easy if you have one of two things. So if you have an organization with a great culture already, there's no blame culture, everyone works together, everyone's quite good at knowing what the thing they want to work on is, but there's not a lot of structure and there's not a lot of focus to say those conversations. Agile transformations can be quite easy because you're just really coming in and doing the process part, but the culture's already there. And the other thing is lots of money, and you just add resource to every team. So every time someone has a good idea, you go, yes, we'll do that. Business case looks great. We'll just give you enough budget so you can get in the skills that you need to deliver it. If you don't have either of those things, it's incredibly hard because often you have to think about work differently and reprioritize work. And sometimes, like I said, some ideas might not go forward, and that's unpalatable. Although you could argue that second way, you're not really doing an agile transformation, but you're using agile processes and then just filling everyone's needs. And what you're not doing is going through the pain of getting the business to understand how to manage those conflicts together and prioritize in a professional way. So if you then have to do that, you'll find those old habits will be quite detrimental.
Lovely, thank you. I totally agree. I think, you do need money, don't you? Because the money can go into things like coaching, into training, because you are moving from traditional, say, delivery to completely new ways of working, and that includes some very new roles, like the product owner, the scrum master, and the way that the team would interact in terms of having a cross-functional team. And that even changes things like HR, how you're hiring, creating those new roles. And for creating those new roles, for them to be working in, say, Scrum or Kanban or whatever it is that you choose, or scaled agile, less safe, whatever, you do need a lot of training. You need expertise that hold your hands, because they're the ones with the expertise who have been through that change before and can show you where things might fall out. That they bring their expertise to help you with those things that you might not be even looking out for or considering before you actually hit those problems.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 100% agree with that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's things that go hand in hand with this. And you mentioned HR things. So things even like your reward and recognition. If reward and recognition programs are rewarding line management teams and then you suddenly put everyone into squads and it doesn't catch up with that, then you'll be fighting a losing battle. People won't feel like they can be rewarded in a cross-functional team, and therefore they will be continually wanting to deliver work outside of that. And for the same for your performance management. So if you have a line manager setting objectives and as a manager, how you are how you are performance managed, it relates directly to just how your team are doing that report to you. You're going to be less likely to embrace cross-functional working because you will find that you're giving up control, but that could have an impact on your overall performance. It could impact on your bonus. So all of those sorts of things need to be on the roadmap somewhere. They need to be considered somewhere. They need to be reviewed. And often there's quite small teams delivering an agile transformation.
Yeah.
So it's all resource, and often you won't see any outcomes from agile transformation until quite a bit down the line, because it tends to make things even a little bit inefficient at first while you're doing all that training and people are getting up to speed and they're trying to do things in a different way. So businesses need to be receptive to the fact that they want all the good stuff out, but that takes time.
It's a journey, isn't it? It's not a case of, oh, by that date we will be agile. That's just not how it works. Yeah. I think I personally have a bit of a problem with calling it a transformation. You don't have a caterpillar that's going to change into a butterfly within 2 weeks. That's not how it works. I think, when we consider the mindset is the hardest thing to change, but it's actually where the most benefit is. And so, just to tie it back to what we were saying, HR, but there's also finance and how you're financing the products or the project. We talk about sort of focusing on financing the work stream, the value stream, rather than the project and how many heads you've got within a project. What are your thoughts on that?
Finance tends to be, in the transformations I've been involved with, one of the last big rocks to tackle, and it's really challenging because by its nature, people who are finance, they have accounting degrees, they tend to be limited by regulatory environments and the reporting that's obviously very significant, and those people can struggle a lot with some of the concepts within delivering value. So when you look at traditional projects, your CapEx, your RevEx, and this is very important, which is why most projects people will timesheet, and it will be by which stage you're at, and does this add value? Was this something that we can capitalize on? So the thinking behind financing for agile teams can be a little bit different to that. With the idea that if the team have a North Rock, the big North Star, they have something that they are delivering to. Everything that team does adds value towards the deliverable, even the things that don't go forward, because all of that creates the learning environment that allows the solution to develop. And that concept can be quite difficult. And it's a bit of a barrier often to break through. At least two of the transformation I've been involved in didn't tackle it. They got to the point where they said, actually, we accept that old way of financing is probably how we're going to, at least for now, continue. So it's definitely one of the most challenging aspects towards the end. I say towards the end because it tends to be towards the end.
Which is why, it's so important to have the design thinking. When you look at the design thinking, the first thing you would approach is, why are we doing this? What's our North Star? And then we think about the what and the how we're going to achieve it. I'm quoting Simon Sinek here. These guys, most companies look at from outside that circle to the what, how, and why.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I've got that wrong, right? I'm not sure. But yeah, it's really interesting. Design thinking, approaching it that way first, and then financing that value stream that you're looking at. What do you aim to achieve? What are your goals? What are your assumptions? That's a great way to approach your transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find most organizations actually tend to be quite good at that top strategic thinking. Most organizations, big organizations, have a strategy. They understand what they want to achieve. And then at the bottom, you have teams that are very good at sometimes being very reactive and doing the work and chugging through. Where the challenges come in, particularly in the last 2 transformations I'm involved in, is gluing those together in a coherent way that makes sense. In a way that means that the strategy isn't an abstract concept at the top. It's actually threaded throughout the work that's being delivered by teams that are actually the doers doing the work. Yeah. Because what you tend to see is the desire to be reactive is great, but sometimes teams can become too reactive and they are delivering the here and now, or firefighting is a term that you'll hear. But that takes away from some of the stuff that's going to pay off for the strategy longer term. So you have a continuous pull between those prioritizations, and that's where a really consistent prioritization method that takes into account not just the what pays off now, what's the most value now, but what do we want to do to achieve the strategy, and balance those things is really key.
Amazing. Okay, so just to summarize the keys, the 2 key elements of success, there are probably quite a few more, but the ones that we focused on today were having a North Star, understanding what is the vision, what are we trying to achieve, because that's wonderful in aligning all your teams together to focus on the outcomes that we need to. And the other one is how are we financing this, and that requires quite a big shift in thought and the way the organization funds products. Awesome. Any other thoughts on that before we move on to our other questions?
Probably loads, but let's move on, or we'll be here all day.
Yeah. Just a quick one for our listeners. If you're enjoying this, please do subscribe and like and share it with any of your friends that you think might enjoy this podcast. Okay, so on to our third question of the day. How can organizations create a culture of continuous learning and improvement?
So it's one of the biggest things people want to achieve. We want to be continuously learning, stay ahead of what's happening in industry. This is where your almost like your agile basic ceremonies need to be mature. So using your sprint reviews on the stakeholder front, really eliciting the feedback from those stakeholders that might have a lot of information about the customer, or that might have a lot of valuable information to add back into the backlog, and your retros for the team, so that they're continually thinking about how do we improve going forward. I think what you'll see in quite early teams that are quite overconfident is they'll talk about all the good stuff that they've done. Yeah. They find it more difficult to be self-reflective and actually say, what can we learn? And that sometimes is a hallmark that in the past there's been a blame culture, or that there's been negative consequences if you've been seen to do something wrong. So really getting right from the bottom, but throughout all your levels, people to embrace the idea of failure as an opportunity to get better. Now, I've seen this struggle because of the way it's seen by leadership when you ask for help, and that impacts people. So if the people at the top are changing, but it's not felt by the people on the ground in the squads, they'll still be reluctant to come forward and talk about how they think things can be made better. Likewise, if people aren't following up on those actions, so that's closing the loop in things like your retros. Running something like a quarterly retro could be really valuable, particularly in scaled agile, where you're often in a quarterly cadence, because it allows the teams to look at not just the sprint level, but open that up and that thinking up to how can we make this better overall? What can improve? Yeah. And then there's the big gold star that everyone wants, which is innovation. So everyone wants to be innovative. Everyone wants to bring that power of that innovation in. But for your teams to be innovative, for them to really embrace that thinking, they need 2 things. They need permission and they need time. And often permission is fairly forthcoming, but can be a bit lightweight. So it's like, we want you to be innovative, go away and have these thinking, but there's no substance to back that up. There's no way to bring those ideas back, and there's no time for those people to actually go away and be innovative.
And by the way, you can't make any mistakes. You can't fail.
Don't bring me bad ideas. I only want to hear good ones, but you've got no time to go and test and experiment and see if those ideas are worthwhile. yeah, I think I've seen a number of different ways companies have tried to embrace innovation. One of my organizations in the past created an innovation hub where people could come and discuss ideas and try and get some time to bounce around. And that's really good. I suppose the thing lacking there a little bit is that it's not embedded within the team. The team aren't innovating together.
So I read somewhere, I can't remember what company it was. I think it might have been Google. They've got 20% of their sprint, that's 2 days every 2 weeks, that they can work on anything they want to do, and basically, that's where the biggest sort of big bang sort of aha moments happened, when they just went ahead and worked on any problem that they wanted to work on. And that's where the biggest sort of innovation points happened. I'm sure I'll remember after the podcast the specifics of which, but I think it was DoubleClick in Google. That was one of their, one of the people that work there had basically progressed through that during their 20% sort of time. And it's actually allocating time and money to that, to innovation for it to work. Otherwise, you can't sort of ask for innovation and you're actually piling a whole load of stuff on top.
We're going to fill you 100% to capacity, but we also want you to innovate.
Yeah.
And I think they also give space. So there's a lot of evidence that suggests that innovation is much easier depending on the environment that you're in. So they create those, I forgot what they're called, like workshops.
Right.
So an actual space in the office where just by the design of that space and the way it's laid out, it's meant to promote people to come up with more innovative ideas that you probably wouldn't do just sitting at your desk in a
That's right. And it creates serendipity as well, doesn't it? Somebody walking around might hear something and they can just get involved, and that way you create this sort of amazing infusion of different minds and different skill sets working together on a problem.
Absolutely.
Just to go back to what you were saying about sort of retros, I find that having the right people at those, so two things: the showcase, the demo side of things, having the right people to come in and sort of give you their opinion, give you their feedback, tell you whether you're on the right track or not. That's really valuable, and I think that's really important. We don't see that very much, and I wish it's something that we can change. And the other thing was, we were talking about sort of psychological safety and having psychological safety, because if somebody's going to tell you off for doing something wrong, guess what? You're not going to bring that at the retro next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with both those points. I think I found where people have called their reviews showcases. People show up to that in a I'm just here to listen to what work you've done kind of way as a stakeholder. And what I find is really common is that in there be they a sprint showcase by the team or a quarterly showcase that's much bigger, is that there is an awful lot of the team telling you what they've done and showing the work, which is great, and then a tiny bit at the end designed for feedback. Not a lot of time for stakeholders to say, I like this, but actually can we do this? Or I like this, but I think my interactions with the customer suggest that maybe there's something more valuable we can do, and that would spark some great conversations that can then be taken away. So I absolutely agree that often the review side of those, the aim of those ceremonies can be just reduced to where it's not as valuable. And nothing will deter people from speaking up in retros more than either being have negative consequences for saying things, or by people just agreeing with them. You get your product manager, Scrum Master going, yeah, absolutely, that's a huge problem, absolutely, and then they never do anything.
They just don't.
Nothing ever changes. No one comes back to say, do you know what? I've gone and had these conversations, and actually, there isn't anything we can do about that right now. but it's acknowledged and people are aware that this is a blocker or a problem for the team. At least that gives someone the closure of someone's listened and heard.
Yeah.
It's when people are saying the same things every retro, same things, and nothing ever gets done. That will just eventually they'll just stop raising anything because they will think,
demoralizing, isn't it? You know, why would you bring things up? You'll just, you know, you'll just feel like you've not been listened to, or that you're distracting from other stuff that's happening during that retro, and that's so negative. It's, you know, when we talk about creating a culture of continuous learning and improvement, how can you do that if you don't have psychological safety where people can come with your problems, but then also to actually have actions coming out of it and following it up? So a slight tangent here. Whose responsibility is it, do you feel, to sort of follow up on these things?
So that might depend on the kind of roles and setup that you've got in your organization. So it depends on who the facilitator is.
Yeah.
If you have scrum masters, I would expect your scrum master to be facilitating these ceremonies, and I would expect the scrum master to be at least aligning actions, and not just actions, but closing that loop within that retro to say, and this is where we expect you to come back. Is it the next retro? Do we want an update by email? How? And then chasing that up. So that's where a scrum master can come in. Could be a delivery manager, could be product manager, could be product owner. I think it depends on the roles and expectations that your organization have determined, because they can vary from place to place. And sometimes organizations have been using the same name for a role, but the way they're hired and the skills and the way they're implemented can be quite different. And that's where, as a facilitator, not only closing the loop, and the other thought in my mind when we were talking was, it's about giving space for everyone. So as a facilitator, being aware of how people might show up to the meeting and how you manage to get out the good stuff. So you'll see this in teams where perhaps you've got someone in that role, product manager or product owner, whoever it is, and they're maybe not as on the emotional intelligence quota as you perhaps would like.
Right. Yeah.
So there might be someone in that team that's really vocal and they find them quite annoying. They're like, this person's always negative, always saying negative things. I'll just brush past because they moan in every single meeting.
Yeah. Cry wolf too many times and never.
Yeah, exactly. And at that point, you should be hoping that if they're being coached, the coach will be saying, okay, try and put your personal feelings aside and the way they're saying that thing aside, and try and be a little bit more critical on the content of what they're saying. What is actually the issue? Or is there a root cause issue? Is there actually some valuable feedback? It's just not coming through in a very positive way. How are you leading those meetings to make sure that you're moving away from the moans to these are the things actually that we want to capture as key issues that we're having for the team? And likewise, you might get people in there that never say a word. There's lots of really noisy people in that room that are really happy to come to the table with all the things that that are blocking them.
Yeah.
And then you might have someone in the team that never speaks. Now, the likelihood that there is nothing on their mind is very small.
I guess you've got to consider whether they're introverts, extroverts, omniverts. I think, that's something that I usually try to do at the start of working with a new group is to just try to understand how we'd like to work. So we've got this. I think we did it together when we were working together as an agile coaching team, and it's just nice to sort of have a team charter where you can sort of understand a little bit more about people in terms of, like, their habits, when they like to start work, so the time of the day, when is the best time to approach them, how are you best approaching them, do they prefer one-to-ones or do they prefer team settings, that sort of thing, and that I find that really helpful.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's just get back. I love chatting to you because there's so much to cover. I think let's get back to our question, which was, how can organizations create a culture of continuous learning? And I think we've covered that. Anything else you want to say on that subject before we move on?
No, we could move on. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. Okay. The last thing is the top. So what you'll see is that you'll get this team level continuous improvement culture.
Yeah.
And that doesn't go any higher than the managers, because at the strategic level, at the management level, they're still exhibiting negative behaviors. They're still locked in a lot of battles over resource or priorities and things.
Yeah.
So it does have to come down through the top and all layers. Otherwise, you just won't get the full benefit.
Fair enough. Thank you. Okay, right. So our last question for the day is, what are the most exciting trends in agile transformation?
Yeah, great question. AI, obviously, one of the biggest emerging trends. It's really exciting to see the developments and how things like ChatGPT are evolving.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to be emerging in Agile as well. I mean, you're never, hopefully, because it might take my job, but you're never going to take away the human element of cultural transformations. You won't, because there's some things that you need people for. But actually, AI can help with that journey. I think there's probably going to be some quite interesting ways with even smaller teams being able to create good content for training, being able to create good packages using AI to support. I think that might be something that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
And seeing how it might change how teams work as well in the future. So AI, definitely, I think, one of the interesting trends. Scaled Agile, still one of the most key trends coming out in the Agile arena. So it's incredibly common now to have some sort of Agile language in big organizations, and a lot of organizations embarking on a full scaled Agile journey.
Yeah.
There are a number of different ones out there, but actually this seems to be still quite an emerging area. The last few organizations I've worked in aren't going down a fully scaled Agile framework model, but they are doing something which is similar to each other kind of model that seems to be emerging from things like pre-2015 Spotify style modeling and language, but using some of that. The Google use OKR frameworks. So pulling those kind of things in together. Scaled Agile obviously goes far up beyond the boundaries of IT. So it includes all the things. If you are a finance, which we mentioned, if you're a company that sells physical products, it could have stores, it would be merchandising, shipping, logistics, all of these things. And how you apply a Scrum-based framework to teams that are not digital and don't deliver a digital product, that's still quite an interesting area. Definitely doable, but it definitely needs some consideration as to what's the right way of doing this, and to embed those values with the right process for those individual teams, because there's never going to be a one model fits all. So I find that really interesting as a trend. And then organize it. So that's sort of more about organizational agility. And insight-led organizations is a non-agile but emerging trend, where most organizations are now seeing that some of their biggest assets, apart from their physical assets and the money in the bank, is their people and their information, their data, and how do they leverage all of those. So I do have a model that's brought those all together, which I will share some information on. It's
please. Yeah, that's fantastic. We'll put it in the description of the video description.
I will. It's still in development, but it aims to bring in all those concepts together about how can we have organizational agility, but based on insight and leveraging the people and talent and skills that we have to deliver the optimum result.
Wonderful. Awesome stuff. Thank you so much. Shameless plug. I've done a couple of videos on AI.
Hey, excellent.
AI.
Plug, so.
You know what? I'm a big fan of sort of new technology and using it. And I think AI is one of those things that just makes life so much easier for a Scrum Master, I personally think. And as an Agile coach, so, for example, I could go to ChatGPT and say, I've got a retro coming up. Can you design me a retro for this number of people and focusing on one subject? And you just get that information. And of course, don't follow it by the letter. Take it as a template and then work with it. But it saves you a lot of time, and I find myself being much more effective for my team when I can put that time in sort of looking after them in terms of, psychological safety, making sure that they've got things that they need. And I've also realized that I can actually help my team by coming up with a lot of acceptance criteria using AI on the user stories that they're working on. And obviously, as an agile coach, I try to get them to think about these things. But sometimes it's good to have something that jogs the sort of the thinking flow of things. So yeah, I'm a proponent of using AI.
Absolutely, share those, because I would be really interested. And I mean, every coach does it, is it? You normally in the past you would have gone to Google, oh, give me some ideas of retros, and then you read some web. And now with things like ChatGPT, it's a learning algorithm. It knows you, so you can go on your same query and you can have more conversational, but actually you can find more easily information that can help steer you. So yeah, absolutely really useful.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think we've come to the conclusion of our interview today. Is it an interview or is it a chat?
I feel like a chat.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and the information that you've shared with us today. It's much appreciated. And I think I'll just ask you one last question. Okay. What's on your continuous agile journey list?
The thing I've become most interested in lately is business storytelling. How do we tell compelling stories, negotiating and influencing? I've talked a lot about it with my product owners, product managers, when it comes to things like quarterly ceremonies. How are we telling the journey over the last quarter in a way that makes sense and it's relevant to your stakeholders? So the book that I've been reading at the moment is called Unleash the Power of Storytelling, which is by Rob, I'll probably pronounce it, sorry, Beisenbach.
Okay. We'll put that in the notes. We'll put it in the notes for people who want to click on that link and sort of grab that book.
Yeah. So yeah, I found the idea and the concept of business storytelling fascinating.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us today on the Agile Chef. If anybody's listened and enjoyed this, please feel free to share and share with your friends and see who might be interested in listening to our podcast. And I think that is a wrap. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Yeah, have a great day and we'll speak to you soon.
Yes, thank you.